Ladies, gents, it's your boy Rocco, and I'm from the Yap. Welcome back to another boxing news and stuff. Today's video is gonna be a little stacked, so I'm gonna try to make it as quick as possible, so you fools don't have to fucking hear me yap for a while. But there is a lot of stuff to cover. Um, I'm currently making a video for the Naoya Inoue versus Picasso, the Ring 5 event going on Saturday, December 27th. Stay tuned for the predictions of the full fight card. It's coming out on Friday, and then I will be posting the aftermath video on Sunday, seeing whether or not I was right and what's next. But without further ado, let's get on. The aftermath of Joshua versus Jake Paul fight is the first thing on our list. Now, just a little recap what happened. Jake Paul was gonna fight Gervonta Tank Davis earlier this month. I believe it was like around the 13th or 14th. Then, you know, they don't end up fighting. They need a late replacement. The venue's already been made and stuff. So Joshua ends up being the chosen one, and arguably a much bigger fight than Gervonta Tank Davis was gonna originally be. And he broke his jaw with a straight right hand. The first clean punch he actually did manage to land in the fight. Joshua broke Jake Paul's jaw, not one, but in two different places. So, as you can see right here, I did my little research and it says that it's going to take around 4 to 6 weeks. But since he did break it in two places, I am going to say that it's going to actually take him the full 6 weeks to heal. But with injuries like this, it comes with rehab. So, even though you're healed, you still have the rehabilitation to do. So, Jake, it's gonna take a while for Jake to even want to start thinking about potential matchups. And with that being said, like a lot of fighters, not even fighters, just people in general, you break a bone, sometimes it comes back stronger. Like there's been fighters who have broken their jaws before, and then they even themselves say it, how they feel that their jaw has become even stronger since then. And then you have the unfortunate people and fighters who break a bone and it's never the same again. It's weaker. It's more fragile. It's more susceptible to pain and injuries than it was previously before breaking it. So even after the rehab, it won't really be until we see him in the ring again where we'll see if he has a good chin or if his chin will even be the same as it was prior to Joshua breaking it. But yeah, it will take him to like summer at the very least. I mean, the earliest. It will take him summer to start talking about potential matchups. But Joshua, on the other hand, he said that he's ready to go to Fury straight after this. He doesn't care about another tune-up. Although it's just not going to be possible. I don't see a world where Fury comes straight out of not fighting, straight out of a loss, and not having fought since that loss, and it's already been like around the year, a little bit more than a year. I don't see a world where he, with those things in mind, he comes out of a fight and fights Joshua. I just don't see it. So we're definitely gonna see Joshua in another kind of tuna fight, although it will be more of an actual tuna fight, more difficult and tougher fight. Now, the vacant belts at 168 pounds, a super middleweight division, was once crowned for a while by Saul Canelo Alvarez, who then got beat in September of this year in his match against Terrence Bud Crawford. I knew Crawford wasn't going to stay at 168. I just felt like it was just, those guys are just too big. You could say, oh, Canelo, he beat Canelo. But Canelo was already a small guy for the division himself. So it wasn't like he was tackling that big of a guy. As opposed to like Edgar Berlanga. Yeah, he doesn't have the fucking, he's not technical. He doesn't have the natural skills and all that. But you're talking about a guy who weighs that Friday 168 and then comes in the next day as a cruiserweight, damn near 200 pounds. So it's a big difference of size and and stature when it comes to those boys. I just didn't see, especially at his age, Terrence Bud Crawford wanting to stick around and defending his undisputed reign. So I knew these belts were going to be vacant, but I didn't think it was because he retired. But he did retire, so that means these belts are due for champions. Now, typically when there's a vacant belt, the sanctioning bodies will decide one of two things. They either decide to pick two of their highest ranking guys and pin them against each other and be like, the winner is now the new champion, or whoever's the interim champion, they'll just be like, oh, we'll elevate you to world champion status, and then we'll just have two guys fight for the vacant interim belt, you know? So you could either get what's kind of known as the email champ thing, where like via email you learn that you're now the world champion, you got elevated, or you get notified that, hey, if you want to be world champion, you gotta fight this other guy, and the winner becomes the world champion. So that's what's gonna happen, and that rolls into the next thing of Resendiz versus Berlanga. Now, Amanda Resendiz is currently sitting at 16 victories, 2 losses, 0 draws, 11 of those victories coming by way of knockout, facing off potentially early 2026 against Edgar Berlanga, who's currently sitting at 23 wins, 2 losses, one of those losses by knockout, 0 draws, and 18 of those victories coming by way of knockout. Now, you most likely know who Berlanga is. He was very popular for having like 16, 17, I believe it was like 16 or 17 of his fights all being first round knockouts. That's how he became popular. And then he became more popular, obviously, because he had his fight with Canelo Alvarez in 2024 in September. And then you have his recent fight that also gave him a lot of stardom, unfortunately in a bad way for him, was in July of 2025 this year in the Ring 3, where he faced off against Hamza Shiraz, and Hamza Shiraz knocked him out in the 5th round. So, yeah, and that's his last fight. He hasn't fought since. Now, on the other hand, you most definitely probably don't know who Amando Resendiz is. Amando Resendiz is a guy who's been up and coming in the 168-pound division, but he didn't get his big shot at like a big name and a good title until this year, back in May, where he defeated Caleb Plant. So Caleb Plant, for the longest time, we've been wanting to see him fight Charlo, but Charlo being with his mental health issues and whatnot, he hasn't fought in a while. But Charlo and Caleb and Benavides, when Benavides was at 168, those 3 names were circling around to fight each other. We wanted to see Charlo against Caleb and Benavides and all those mix-ups. So when they were when the return of Charlo, he said, I want a tuna fight, and then I'll fight I'll fight Caleb. So what they decided to do, they did the curse thing that seems to have a terrible track record of working. They had both Charlo and Caleb Plant fighting the same night, with the promise of, if they both win their fights, they fight later in the year in the future. Charlo won his. Caleb Plant lost his against Resendiz. Comfortable victory for Resendiz. It was a unanimous decision victory. It was very comfortable, especially as we all know the curse of Caleb Plant, that after like the 5th or 6th round, for some reason his gas is just completely gone and he's in survival mode from then on. But yeah, Resendiz, comfortable win, became the interim champion for the WBA. But as I said, with the vacant belts, they choose one of 2 paths in order to get a new champion. And when it comes to the WBA, they chose elevating a guy to world championship status, and that is Amanda Resendiz. So Resendiz is now the WBA world champion at 168 pounds because he was elevated from interim to world title. So technically, yes, if this fight does happen and it is made, nothing is yet confirmed, although it's a lot solid in the sense of like it really seems like this fight's gonna happen. This would be his first title defense, and it's also rumored that it would be taking place in the undercard of Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios. So this could be the co-main event of the night, which would elevate that whole night a lot more, in my opinion. This is a fantastic fight. Um, I would really enjoy watching this fight. I don't see a world where this fight doesn't bring a lot of um, it doesn't give you worth, for your buck, whether you paid or not. It's a worth watch, and it's definitely a good hype build up for the main event, which would be Ryan Garcia against Mario Barrios. But yeah, and then leading into vacant belts still in that area, the WBO supposedly is taking action and is ordering that for its new champ, it's taking the different path from the WBA, and it's selected two of their high-ranking fighters, in order to duke it out and become the new champion at 168 for them. Those two fighters have been Hamza Shiraz, who's sitting at 22 victories, 18 of those victories by way of knockout, one loss and one draw. Diego versus Diego Pacheco, 25 victories, 18 of those by way of knockout, with 0 draws and 0 losses. Pacheco, I made a video about, and another boxing news and stuff, about his recent victory against Sadho, who's African descendant French fighter, who's a pretty mean puncher and brawler, and how Pacheco really didn't look too good, and it was actually a very disappointing matchup. Although he did comfortably win, in my opinion, Pacheco did take the victory pretty comfortably in terms of rounds and the points, but it was a very ugly slug wrestling fest round by round. As opposed to Shiraz, who his last fight was in July, hasn't fought since, and as I mentioned earlier, it was against Edgar Berlanga, where he knocked him out in the 5th round. This is kind of weird because this is going to seem like the first title fight at 168 since Crawford's retirement, but originally it was supposed to be the WBC, because this exact same rumor was saying that the WBC wanted a new champion, so it pinned 2 fighters to fight each other for the belt, and that was Shiraz again, but it was against Mbili. So the WBC ordered Shiraz versus Mbili in order to crown the new champion at 168, and for whatever reason, it seems like that fell off, or it wasn't close to being a thing. But although nothing is definitive for this one, it is more plausible to happen, and it does seem more likely to happen than Mbili's, like Shiraz against Mbili. And this is a banging fight. This is arguably one of the most entertaining and best fights you can have. 2 of the tallest, long arm reach and lankiest, hard hitting punchers with technicism. I mean, they're both basically almost the exact same fighter. They're both tall. They're both long armed. They both have pretty solid technicism. They're both pretty good at being able to fight in the mid to long distance with having no problem fighting in the inside, and they both hit hard. So, this is a really good fight. This has been a fight that I've been wanting for a while, since Shiraz moved up to 168, and especially after he defeated Edgar Berlanga. So yeah, this fight could potentially happen early next year as well, but like I said, nothing is confirmed as of yet. Now, next topic that we have is something that is confirmed, is already scheduled to happen, is Nick Ball defending his WBA belt, WBA World Championship belt at 126 pounds against ex-WBC 126-pound champion Brandon Figueroa. Nick Ball sitting at 23 victories, 13 by those via KO, 0 losses, 1 draw. And Brandon Figueroa is currently at 26 victories, 19 of those victories by KO, 2 losses, and 1 draw. Brandon has become the mandatory challenger for the WBA belt. So that's why this fight is taking place. Also, I think it's a good stay ready fight for Ball. You know, it's pretty high profile in the division. World champion at 122, and then ex world champion at 126. You know, it's a good fight for him to build more, um, a better resume, and to get his name out there, and to have a good title defense. But it's also a good fight to kind of stay ready, kind of stay, you know, with a pretty dangerous fight before going to the other fights, like whether it's defending his title against someone like damn, I always forget his name. Sorry about that, but um, I think his name is Shushu Carrington. I'm pretty sure, or unifying against other champions. But he Brandon's coming out of a he's coming out of victory, but before the victory, he had a loss where he was defending his belt against Stephen Fulton, and then Stephen Fulton beat him. And then as a comeback match, he fought against a guy named Joet Gonzalez. Nothing too crazy, but it was a good comeback victory for him. And this fight's actually taking place in February 7th of next year, 2026, in Liverpool, in the UK. And yeah, this is a good fight. This is a definite watch for the future of 126. Like I said, if Nick Ball wins, you want to stay tuned as to who he's going to call out, or who he's saying he has in mind, like seriously in mind. And if Figueroa wins, it's still a good matchup for potential fights in the future, you know? So stay tuned for that one. Then you have the Lawrence Okoli third round victory. Lawrence Okoli is currently stating after the victory 22 victories, 16 of them by knockout, 1 loss and 0 draws. Uh, he had this victory over there in Nigeria on the 21st of December of this year against Tete. Um, Tete, you may know as that guy who kind of tests his prospects. He's kind of like the journeyman who prove excuse me, who shows whether or not a prospect is ready to enter the contender level of boxing for the heavyweight. He did it against Joshua. He did it against Dubois. Now he's doing it against Lawrence Okoli. Um, but the reason this one kind of seems a little, in my opinion, a little less impressive than against like a Dubois or a Joshua is that he is older than when those two guys fought him, and also he was already not only in a two fight in a like back to back 2 loss victory, but they were by knockout as well. Like Okoli is now Tete, after getting knocked out by Okoli, is now at a consecutive 3 loss KO in his record. So he's been knocked out 3 times in a row in his last 3 fights. But still, nonetheless, it is an impressive thing that Okoli did this to him, and that he did it faster. But like I said, take it with a grain of salt that he did this faster than Joshua or Dubois, because at the end of the day, like I said, he's a lot older, worn down than when Dubois, and especially when Joshua faced him. And he's already been, he's coming from a 2 knockout streak. So take that with a grain of salt. But it is still a good victory in his resume. But a little backstory: Okoli has already been a world champion. He was a unified champion at cruiserweight, so he is like the Usyk type of guy. He's a cruiserweight jumping to heavyweight after being a champion at cruiserweight, and he's kind of building himself up the right way in order to get his body used to and get himself used to having to face against the big boys of boxing, who are the heavyweights. And he's currently stating at the WBC silver champion for the heavyweight division, so he does have a title at least of pretty significant um like weight to it. And after the fight, the surprising thing is, after the fight, he did call out somebody, but instead of being, somebody not that dangerous or somebody that popular, he called out Moses Itama, who is currently the most, hyped man at the heavyweight division, seen as the future, seen as a guy who's going to reign for a very, very long time at the heavyweight division. He's barely like 21 or 22 years old. I think he's barely 21 years old. And he's already a guy who people want to see him in the ring with Usyk. People want to see him in the ring with Joseph Parker, all these big names, but especially like Usyk, who's the undisputed, who was the, the two division, two-time heavyweight undisputed champion of the world. So yeah, that was a surprising thing. My opinion, he could probably get that fight. I view that as a good fight for Itama to kind of still build up his resume. But in my opinion, I see a more of a possibility for him to be like a tune-up fight for Joshua or Fury. Like I said, Joshua, I don't see a world where Fury comes out of the gate after his last fight was a loss to Usyk, and that was like over a year ago. And him coming out of the gate to fight Joshua, I don't see a world where that happens. So there's definitely gonna be a tune-up, and if Joshua's smart, he's gonna have a tune-up too. It only builds up the fight more, and it only takes out more ring rust. Cause how much ring rust can Jake Paul take off? So I do see potential that Lawrence Okoli could become a tune-up fight for Joshua or Fury. But if he doesn't, and he still wants to build his resume and kind of uh, like show us the boxing fans that yeah, a fight with him and Itama would be entertaining and worth watching, is if he fights someone like Richard Torres Jr. In my opinion, you can say what you want. Oh, he's a top ranked build up. You know how the top ranked guys are. But in my opinion, Richard Torres Jr. is a very good fighter, and it would be kind of fair because it's a guy who's a cruiserweight coming up to heavyweight, and it's versus a guy Torres who is a natural heavyweight, but he's a small heavyweight. So it would be pretty balanced in that no man is kind of bigger than the other guy. But I think a fight over Torres Jr. would not only give him the popularity and give him the credibility, but it would help him push for those big fights against someone like Itama. And if not, I mean, if Zhang wants to come back into the picture, I don't see why not Lawrence Okoli could fight Zhang. Zhang could use the name of Okoli to kind of have a respectable comeback fight, and Okoli could use the name of Zhang in order to boost his profile and his credibility. But with that being said, the next topic is Cavalier versus Kinba. I hope I'm saying that right. Most definitely probably not. But Cavalier is currently sitting at 26 victories, 18 of them by knockout, 0 draws, 0 losses, defending his WBC interim heavyweight title against Damien Kinba. I hope I'm saying that right. Who's currently sitting at 17 victories, 11 of them by knockout, 0 losses, 0 draws. This is taking place in January 26th, so pretty much a month from now. January 26th, 2026 in Germany, where Cavalier was from. So this is kind of like a homecoming fight / stay ready fight for Cavalier. This is this is a pretty good fight in the sense of just seeing Cavalier come back and against an actual undefeated, hard-hitting guy. But I don't see a world where Cavalier doesn't knock this fool out. He's never faced anybody in the level of Cavalier, and he's never even fought for a title at all, whether it's like European champion or IBF international champion or like one of those type of level of fights. This is his first ever belt in the professional world, and it's against what arguably the number one deserving guy for Usyk. So I don't see a world where Cavalier doesn't win. Especially, I don't see a world where he doesn't knock him out, and I don't see a world where he doesn't just beat him. But things can happen in boxing. But yeah, that's just my opinion. But at the end of the day, like I said, this is a homecoming fight. Slash, stay ready for whatever Usyk is doing or planning on doing. Because like I said, in my opinion, before the Wardley fight, Joseph Parker was the number one deserving guy, and then number two was Kavaliev. Some people had it backwards. They have Kavaliev as the number one guy, and it was it's not that crazy of a thing to say. These are the two most deserving guys. But since Parker not only lost, but tested positive for cocaine, he's completely out of the picture now. So that only means, in my opinion, Cavalier is the one who deserves it more than anybody, you know? And this obviously seems, like I said, as a homecoming slash stay ready fight, just in case the Usyk fight comes up, he's ready to go, and he's not with a lot of ring rust, which is a good idea in my opinion. Now, the last thing that we have for the boxing news and stuff, promise I'm trying to wrap it up, is Moratalia versus Cruz for the vacant IBF 135-pound championship belt. Raymond Moratalia is currently at 23 victories, 17 of those victories by way of knockout, 0 losses, 0 draws, facing off against Andy Cruz, who is currently sitting at 6 fights, 3 of them by knockout, 0 losses, 0 draws. You may be wondering what the fuck is a guy who barely doesn't even have double-digit fights is doing, fighting for a world championship belt, even if it's vacant. Well, Cruz is different in the sense of, Cruz is a gold medal Olympic champion. So typically those guys who do stuff like that, especially if you have a medal, and especially if you have a gold one like Cruz, you're kind of forced into not waiting that long to get into the serious fights. Meaning, like, typically a guy, it will take him like 15 fights in a row to win in order to get like NABF belt or like a international belt, stuff like that. But when it comes to, Olympic gold medalists and stuff like that, you're kind of viewed as like jumping the gun. Like, no, like by your fifth fight, you should be fighting for an NABF belt or an international belt. And for your 10th fight, you should be possibly at the latest fighting for an interim belt. You know what I mean? So that's why Cruz is coming. And Cruz is a guy who took no time. He wasted no time. He straight out of the first fight, he went for an IBF, like, I'm pretty sure it was IBF, like, international. And he defended that, like, 4 times. So he's been building himself in the IBF rankings since the very first fight in the professional after coming from the Olympics and winning gold. And, this is a banging fight. This is a great fight, in my opinion. This is taking place in January 24th in Las Vegas next year in 2026. And also a cool thing is that the main event is them, but also the co-main event is Kali Ko versus Jesse Hart as the main event. And then also it will be featuring the return of Madrimov, who hasn't fought since his decision loss versus Virgil Ortiz earlier this year. And I still think Madrimov is one of the top guys at the division. I think him versus any of the top guys in the division is an interesting fight. I would like to see him, this is obviously like a comeback fight. It's supposed to be a lot easier for him in order to come out victorious. So that way he could go back in the ring with bigger profile, tougher, more money fights. But I would love to see him have this fight and then fight Bohacek. Bohacek hasn't fought since his loss. I think it was earlier this year as well. He hasn't fought since, and then him and Bohacek are great fights. Bohacek is in the same boat, in my opinion, where putting him in the ring with any of these top guys is a fantastic fight. So I would love to see him have this kind of like comeback tune-up fight, get it over with, and then get in the ring with like Bohacek, because I think that would not only cross a name out for him, but it would help him get back in there sooner if he beat someone like Bohacek, especially if he could like dominate him or if he could even knock him out. I think that would do tremendous work for Madrimov for his return to the top level fights. So thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you for wasting time out of your day to watch this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you're new, subscribe. And if you like this video, I have more videos. Go check those out if you haven't. And, with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay tuned for that Inoue and Picasso Ring 5. Ring 5 card. I will be posting that on Friday. And I will be posting, the prediction will be on Friday. And the aftermath on Sunday, seeing how wrong or right I was and what's next for the fighters. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good day. God bless.